So as Saagar and I debated extensively yesterday, Trump invoked the Alien Enemies Act over the weekend, and this set off a mad scramble and a lot of questions about whether or not they openly defied court orders. So I'm going to give you some details about the timing that is coming out now with regard to when a judge issued a temporary restraining order saying you cannot move forward with deportations under these powers, when planes took off, where they were when he issued his ruling from the bench saying even if planes are in the air, you need to turn them around, where they were when the final order came out, et cetera. We'll get to that in a moment. But yesterday, there was another court hearing with the same judge who was demanding answers from the government about what the hell happened here? Under what justification did you not listen to my order? And how did we get to where we are? So let's go ahead and put this up on the screen. This is from Kyle Cheney, who is Politico's court reporter and has done a good job tracking the many lawsuits against this administration at this point. So he says the hearing is over. Boasberg was incredulous that DOJ claimed he had no authority to order the plane to turn around just because it crossed out of U.S. airspace, something he said was well established in many contexts. He wants details about whether DOJ openly defied his order on March 15th when it ordered planes to take off and leave U.S. airspace, even after he orally ordered the government not to do that. The remedy for an order they don't like, Boasberg said, is to appeal or seek to modify it, not simply to ignore it. He wants a sworn declaration by noon tomorrow with details about how this played out. Can put the next tear sheet up on the screen. It has some additional details here, ties together some of the different places where the Trump administration has at least tested the bounds of defiance of court orders. Will say the headline is Trump already on a collision course with the courts, hits the gas. This is kind of the most combustible situation with regard to potential, like, just outright direct defiance. And part of what they write in this article, which is also by the same guy, Kyle Cheney, along with two other co-authors, is on Monday afternoon, the Justice Department urged Boasberg to call off his scrutiny of Trump's decision to label some Venezuelan migrants as terrorists in order to, quote, de-escalate the grave incursions on executive branch authority that have already arisen. When Boasberg refused to cancel that Monday afternoon hearing, the DOJ asked a federal appellate court to remove this judge from the case altogether, an extraordinary step to circumvent judicial scrutiny. The White House, for its part, is dismissing arguments that the president's actions are pushing the country toward a constitutional crisis. Officials agree the nation is in one, but they blame it on the courts, framing recent rulings as the moves of radical leftist judges, though some of those judges were appointed by Republican presidents. Quote, the constitutional crisis is not in the executive branch, it's in the judiciary branch, White House spokesperson Harrison Field said, adding that the pushback to the administration's weekend deportations, quotes, speaks more of Democrats' loyalty or lack thereof to this nation than anything else. So the government has made a few claims here to claim that they are not defying court orders. One is they say that, well, you issued the order to turn the planes around from the bench, and we don't really think that that has the same weight as a written order. The judge very much yesterday in that hearing rejected that particular claim. Another claim that was made was that, oh, well, the planes were over international waters when you issued your ruling, so it was too late, basically. We couldn't or wouldn't, once it was over international waters, we weren't going to turn them around. Well, one thing that came out yesterday, I can put this up on the screen, this chart of the flights, at least one of the flights was actually still on the ground at the time in Texas when the initial order at 6:48 was read from the bench. Okay, so another claim that the government has made is, well, actually that particular plane, the third one, and by the way, the other two had not yet reached their destination, either when that initial order was read from the bench or when the final written order came down. So the other claim was, well, the third plane, that one was subject, that wasn't Alien Enemies Act, that was different powers. Of course, we don't know who was on the plane, so we have no idea. And basically, Saagar, yesterday, the government pretty much stonewalled it, just wouldn't answer any questions.
The government is citing Title 50 authority, which is intelligence. Like you said, on the third plane, the result of the hearing yesterday basically is Judge Boasberg is demanding that the government issue a sworn affidavit that the third plane was not invoked under the Alien Enemies Act and was used under a different authority. They said none of the plaintiffs, of the 5 plaintiffs that were ordered under Judge Boasberg, were on board that plane. It was the other too. So this is almost certainly rocketing to the Supreme Court within the next 2 weeks. The authority over Alien Enemies Act, over the ability of a federal district judge to order something, what I think is extraordinary. We debated it extensively yesterday, to literally force a plane that is outside of the United States to turn around and come back to the United States. There's both legal scrutiny over that specifically. As I understand it from Boasberg, this is not a ruling on the Alien Enemies Act whatsoever. He is asking for a declaration of who is covered under the Alien Enemies Act, but the Alien Enemies Act provision is not itself the one that is under a legal scrutiny. It's the removal authority for due process under the government for these specific plaintiffs that were named by the ACLU. But I was just saying, in terms of what I read yesterday from the review of the Alien Enemies Act, the judge, it's complicated. Basically, it's not as cut and dry, I think, as saying this was up to the judge as to whether this was the Alien Enemies Act or not, as to whether it is employable. It is these specific individuals, the legitimacy of applying that to these specific individuals under the ACLU of the plaintiffs with this action that the planes took off. And I know this is incredibly complicated. I've genuinely tried to read for hours about something called like justiciability or something. Judicity, which is the ability to apply judicial review, which is what the government is also claiming, and that came out in a Stephen Miller interview. Anyway, go ahead.
So here is the timeline, and this will help clarify some of what happened here. So obviously, Trump has been saying for a long time, including on the campaign trail, I'm going to use the Alien Enemies Act. So lawyers with the ACLU and other groups were like ready to go, like, okay, when he does that, we are going to challenge that. And they started to get, there were news reports that he was moving towards invoking the Alien Enemies Act, and some of the people that they were in touch with started to get moved around. Some Venezuelan migrants started to get moved around and all shipped, excuse me, to this Texas ICE detention facility. And so they suspected, okay, this is imminently coming. So knowing that the government was going to act really fast, they filed an initial suit with these 5 particular migrants as their clients involved in this suit. Then, once it became completely clear, and perhaps even waited for the official declaration, then they expanded it to the entire class of migrants. So that this was now not just about these 5 individuals. This was about the entire class of migrants and who were held, undocumented migrants who were held in DHS facilities, so that it would apply to everyone who might be put on these planes and shipped down. So that's how this ends up. The judge, the court system actually in this instance acted quite quickly. The judge from the bench at 6:48 says, you cannot, I'm issuing a temporary restraining order. That is not a finding on the merits, but his view was it is likely that the use of the Alien Enemies Act is going to be found to be illegal. And so in order to prevent harm in the meantime from occurring, I'm issuing this temporary restraining order so this can work its way through the courts on the merits and decide whether it's appropriate invocation. You know, it's never before, like he's claiming that Venezuela, by dint of their proxy, this gang Tren Aragua, has invaded the country. It's never been issued before outside of like clear-cut wartime instances, 1812, World War I, World War II. So a lot of legal questions, to say the least, about whether this is appropriate. What it led to is the Trump administration being able, without any due process, to take people, they sent them to this foreign prison, notorious in El Salvador for torture and human rights abuse. So anyway, all of this is legally dubious, to say the least. So he issues a temporary restraining order. It's meant to apply to all migrants, not just the 5 that were specifically originally named in the lawsuit. And that's where these, timings come in. So 6:48 is when he issues the ruling. Those planes 2 of the planes are in there, one of them still on the ground. Again, the government has refused to say who was on these planes. They've refused in the hearing yesterday. They refused even to reveal when the planes took off, when they landed. They're citing national security, et cetera. So the very latest from the judge out of this hearing was, you have to tell us by noon, I believe today, the answers to these questions. And if you need to do it under seal, okay, that's fine. And we're going to have another hearing on Friday. But the judge is very perturbed, seemingly, at the government's stonewalling and, defiance of what the judge ultimately asked them to do.
Yeah, that's incredibly well said. That's exactly right. So I know it's really complicated for people to stick with. It will eventually come down to a ruling on Friday. It will almost certainly immediately be appealed, and then it is going to rocket its way to the U.S. Supreme Court, where it is almost certainly that the meta questions around this are going to be solved. And it is one that is now this is always the issue. Like, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't speak to everything. I've done my best to look at the TikTok, like I said, to look into the Title 50 authority, the judicity, the ability to apply judicial review, reading the statute of the Alien Enemies Act itself, which, by the way, is actually worth reading because it's from 1798. But the point being is we are in a situation where this is almost certainly going to get resolved at a high level, and that is, it appears, just from what I've been able to see, that's kind of something that they want, because this is a fight that they are very comfortable picking with the public. As you said, Tom Homan, who is the White House border czar, appeared on television immediately afterwards and was defiant. Let's take a listen.
Proud to be a part of this administration. We're not stopping. I don't care what the judges think. I don't care what the left thinks. We're coming.
So, I mean, pretty defiant there from Tom Homan. This is the thing. At the end of the day, there's a lot of messaging war that's also happening here, because that's not even really true. Like, they do care what the judge thinks, because they're not continuing the deportation flights. They keep saying they're going to. It's not actually happening. And it's one of those where they're both trying to placate an incredible amount of frustration in the administration over the numerous amounts of temporary restraining orders and other things that have come out. This one is a fight that they feel very comfortable both picking and getting the precedent set at the Supreme Court to resolve it in the incoming years of the outcoming years of the administration, to try and resolve these and to basically force a fight on the ability for TRO district judges to intervene on every individual deportation case. But I think what's happening is that we're watching a fight that they feel very, very comfortable picking, in particular on this one. And it's actually kind of noteworthy to me that this is the one that's been the most high-profile one, and it's not Doge, where, look, they've talked a game in the past, and Elon has said, we need to impeach judges, etc. They have never really gone all that far. There's been some questions over, I would say, moderate compliance or whatever on USAID, etc. But this is the one where this is the big one. And for them, I think it too, just yesterday a poll came out showing border and immigration is actually the #1 issue that Trump has right now. Unfortunately for him, he's underwater on the economy, and we're about to talk about that in a second. It actually may be, I've been thinking about this. I think one of the reasons that all of this is happening right now is it doesn't take a genius to look at the news and say, oh my God, every day we're getting pummeled on Doge and on the stock market. Our tariff stuff not working. Now we've got a full-blown war in Gaza. It's like, well, what do we have left? Well, this is the immigration promises, which we literally have not even kept for the first 50 days of the administration. Any serious immigration person could have told you that. The numbers were basically on par for actual deportation with the Biden administration, and they were using Doge excuses, saying, oh, these flights are too expensive to carry that out, which, as we talked, it's like, oh, things are too expensive for Social Security, for immigration, but we have unlimited missiles that we can fire into Yemen. So it was a priorities mismatch, and this is clearly political ground that they feel very strong fighting on.
I think your political analysis there is correct, and I suspect the same, that they wanted to provoke a reaction with this invocation at this moment, because, look, the market shit the bed last week.
Yes.
There is, incredible upset and concern, as we're about to talk about, with regard to the economy. There is probably even more upset and concern with regard to the attacks on Social Security. Elon is dramatically underwater. Trump's approval rating in almost every poll is on the downslide. It's still very early in the administration. And I think that they feel that they are on very firm political ground to pick a fight over people that they describe as Venezuelan gang members. And, so I think you're right that they welcome this fight and they feel politically that this benefits them. You can watch our lengthy debate yesterday. I just will remind that what we're talking about here with regards to, in this particular case, they're arguing not only that, can they invoke the Alien Enemies Act and then just deport whoever they want with no due process, where we don't even get to know who they are, whether they're actually gang members, whether they're even Venezuelan migrants. And by the way, you can go and look at some news reports already of U.S. citizens who have gotten mistakenly swept up by ICE, which now, because of upset over the relatively low deportation numbers, now has had a quota instituted, which of course leads to them being more aggressive about, like, let's just sweep up anyone who looks like they might be undocumented. So in any case, what they're trying to claim is that the president has sole discretion to deport anyone he wants at any time. And as I said yesterday, they have offered no proof that these individuals were actually gang members. We actually don't even know 100% that they are migrants, that they are Venezuelan. I suspect that that is the case, but we don't know who they are. Some of the people who we've been able to learn who they are, their family members and their legal counsel insist they are not gang members. One is a teen who happened to have a rose tattoo that he thought looked cool that he got in Texas, according to his sister. Another is a tattoo artist. Again, one of the common themes is there's just seems to be an assumption that if you have a tattoo, you are a gang member. Another thing the Washington Post uncovered with regard to some of the gang members, alleged gang members in Guantanamo Bay, is that they also were not gang members. They were just from the state of Aragua, which is where this gang originates, and were actually fleeing gang violence. So all of this is to say, that's why I think due process is important, so that, look, the government can make their claims and people have a chance to rebut them. The fact that they've been put into this El Salvador prison that is quite notorious means that journalists, family members, lawyers, no one has access to them. No one could determine the veracity of the claims that are currently being made by the government whatsoever. And so and I'm also not a lawyer, so I can't say which direction the courts are likely to go in with this extraordinary claim of power. But what they're trying to assert is that they can literally remove anyone that this government decides to remove with no scrutiny whatsoever. And so I agree with you, Saagar, that I think it is an intentional provocation. But the reason why I think it's important to fight is because that is an extreme breach of civil rights, constitutional rights, not just vis-a-vis, migrants, undocumented immigrants, et cetera, but genuinely has consequences for all of us. Because again, if you have no due process, you don't even have to prove that they're undocumented immigrants, let alone gang members, let alone criminals, let alone anything else. And so in any case, that's why I view this as quite an extraordinary moment and an important one to follow, even though I do think it is a political provocation to try to cover up from some of the things that they're doing that have become profoundly unpopular with the public.
I take what you're saying. I spent a lot of time thinking about it yesterday. I do think, however, that this, and I think the due process claims, et cetera, are fair. However, I think that missing the context of the broader illegal immigration situation, the extraordinary developments that have happened over the last 4 years, not just to mention the last 25 years, even before that. Not to mention as well much of the legal precedents as to why I don't think it will lead to what you're saying. Between Hamdi, so I actually looked at some case law. Hamdi v. Rumsfeld, which previously talked to the U.S. government's detention, who was a U.S. citizen who was captured in Afghanistan. This cannot actually be applied, to a United States citizen, which the Bush administration wanted to in the past for both indefinite detention and the removal of due process. U.S. citizens specifically have much stronger and well-litigated due process rights than those who are present in the country, especially who are present in the country illegally. And then secondly, there was a second case here, which was al-Awlaki v. Panetta, which followed the drone strike after Anwar al-Awlaki and his family were struck by the United States. Now, I still think that's an insane thing that happened there in the past, but the court basically ruled through dismissal that they do not have the ability to challenge national security authority. Now, the solution here is staring everybody in the face. If everybody thought that the law was so terrible, they should have repealed the law. I think they keep it on the books, because they want the ability to be able to use it. Trump did telegraph this previously. I think that the case law there is actually quite strong, and that there are enough backstops. You can disagree with me, that's fine, to protect U.S. citizens. We just have a big disagreement, I think, which comes to the treatment of and how we should think of people who are present in the country illegally, and whether that's a problem and or not. not. I think it's extraordinary, and in particular that these laws, asylum, TPS, et cetera, have been dramatically abused to facilitate mass illegal immigration. It put a huge amount of strain. And I don't think it's a surprise to me as well on the political front, looking just back at the approval numbers that I have in front of me here. The issue breakdown is Donald Trump has got border security and immigration literally higher than, and he's the only issue area where he is more popular than not on foreign policy, on the economy, on inflation, and on Russia, Ukraine, underwater on all four of those things. I could be wrong. It could be that there is a genuine change in the way that the United States has happened and thinks that this is an extraordinary action. But part of me also feels that the administration wants to pick fights about this, not even to facilitate mass deportation. What I have heard from many is that, guys, you're an idiot if you ever believed mass deportation was going to happen. We have to do these stunts effectively to facilitate mass self-deportation, which is not a surprise considering the launch just a few days ago of the CBP Home app by the administration, the $200 million ad buy. I was watching Fox News the other day, and Kristi Noem popped up on my TV, and I was like, who is watching Fox News that is going to self-deport? That was another thing, just at a basic level
that escaped that DOJ scrutiny that we've been talking about.
Didn't you tell me it cost $200 million?
$200 million.
Right. As I was watching that, I'm like, is this not just basically like feel-good propaganda for the government? So look, I'm not, cheerleading all this stuff. And I don't even disagree that the government should handle this differently. I think I said that yesterday. They absolutely should have released a dossier and or whatever. They're doing it to the maximum claim because they think that this is a fight that they can win, and they want to try and set that legal precedent. Basically, like all presidents before them who are beefing with the courts. I was reading a little bit about the Bush administration response to Hamdi v. Rumsfeld, where Rumsfeld and Alberto Gonzalez actually told Bush to keep holding Hamdi for unlimited detention and to not ignore. We're not talking about a district judge. We're talking about the Supreme Court of the United States. So anyway, some historical and reading other things that I put and thought into the case, which I know is very emotional and is a difficult topic.
Let me go ahead and play Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, who was on the shows last night on primetime on Fox, I think with Jeanine Pirro maybe, who indicated that the flights similar to this one under the Alien Enemies Act were, quote, absolutely going to continue. Let's take a listen to that.
The amazing thing about this, Attorney General, is that you've got a local district court judge now who is saying that he can stop the president from enforcing his powers under Article 2 to protect the American people. Number one, will his order, this temporary restraining order on the Alien Enemies Act, will that be, respected going forward? And where does he get this power to stop the president engaging in national security and foreign policy?
Well, that's it. He's attempting to meddle in national security and foreign affairs, and he can't do it. What he's done is an intrusion on the president's authority. This one federal judge, again, thinks he can control foreign policy for the entire country, and he cannot. And right now we're evaluating our options.
Okay, so the administration may continue doing these flights?
Absolutely. These are foreign terrorists. The president has identified them and designated them as such, and we will continue to follow the Alien Enemies Act.
So she says the flights will absolutely continue. We will see if that is the case. Last thing I'll say about this is I think it can both be the case that it is a stunt, which I tend to agree with you, Saagar, and that it is an extraordinarily important and dangerous development, because there actually is no backstop from anyone getting swept up, especially if they're being sent to this prison where we have no access to them, that is known for torture, where Bukele is out there bragging about the way they'll be used for slave labor to make the prison, quote unquote, financially sustainable. So if you don't have due process, there is not even an ability to check that these are not American citizens, that these are not legitimate green card holders or legitimate visa holders. There's certainly no check to verify that they are actually gang members and terrorists, as is being claimed. And in fact, the government has been caught in those lies with regard to, people being alleged gang members in the past. As I mentioned yesterday, the estimate is there are a few hundred Tren de Aragua members in the entire country. So they're purporting to have deported to this El Salvador prison several hundred just with these flights. So the numbers don't work out. There are almost certainly people who were part of this, and family members and lawyers are already asserting as such, that were part of this deportation that had nothing to do with Tren de Aragua, and who have now been put indefinitely into this prison where no one can reach them, no lawyers, no family members, no journalists, etc. And there actually, without due process, is no backstop from this being able to happen to anyone. So if the courts rule on the merits in Trump's favor, that means he then has claimed these wartime powers to disappear anyone he wants to disappear. And that's why this is, to me, yes, it's a stunt, and also extraordinarily dangerous, troubling abridgment of not just the rights and the human rights of, people who are migrants, of people who are here without papers, but also of American citizens who could easily, and have already been mistakenly snatched up by ICE, who could easily be caught up in this as well if the courts don't take a stand here and enforce, say, look, we are not at war. This is not an invasion. You don't get to claim these wartime authorities. And the other thing is, they've also floated invoking the Insurrection Act. This would be another sort of like wartime authority that they could claim. And the trend with this president, which, yes, other presidents have done similar things. Certainly George W. Bush comes to mind. But the dramatic, rapid expansion of the powers that he has claimed is something that I think is quite extraordinary and deeply troubling.
I think that's understandable. As I said, I think there's a lot of case law and a lot of differences, especially withholding any of this from happening to a U.S. citizen, but we'll continue to cover it here. Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.